Hello everyone. I am aware that I look a bit like microwaved garbage at the moment, and that's because I burnt out recently. I tried to do too much too fast, didn't prioritize my rest time, and then collapsed in a heap after my first Ocrevus infusion. That is partly my own fault, being too ambitious with my time, and mostly the multiple sclerosis. Turns out doing a veterinary video each week might be pushing myself too much and doesn't give my brain enough time to rest, not enough switching off from work. So I'm going to have to break that schedule and mix it up with some speculative biology for now. But for now, I thought I'd talk about my MS diagnosis because that's easy and how that works in Australia with our glorious socialised healthcare. I was diagnosed with MS in 2021, but I had symptoms back in late 2019 when I was pregnant, and most of them were blamed on the pregnancy, including the fatigue and the numbness in my hands, which was mistaken for carpal tunnel. The altered sensation in my hands was my most obvious symptom. I had the fatigue as well, but I was also a new mum, so that was chalked up to that. But my supposed carpal tunnel was not getting better as expected after birth and was actually getting worse. And as a veterinary surgeon, it was driving me insane. It would typically start as numbness, like I was wearing a thick glove, and that would progress to pins and needles, which would progress to shooting pain all the way up to my shoulders. And the worst possible thing I could do for this was try to perform surgery, where I was in a restrictive gown with surgical gloves on top, particularly because patients are warmed during surgery, so it's hot. And anyone with MS will quickly learn that being too hot often makes everything worse. So trying to perform surgery would put me into a lot of pain. And then because I assumed this was carpal tunnel, I would ice my wrists. And those of us with MS quickly learn cold makes everything worse too. So I would end up with pins and needles in my hands, which would increase to like daggers and knives until I could feel it shooting up to my shoulders. In addition to this, I was under a lot of stress and distress and was in an abusive relationship at the time while trying to manage a baby with way less help than I should have had. So I complained a lot to my doctor, who organised a neurology referral at a private practice and a wrist ultrasound. At this stage, I was choosing to go through the private system because even though I'd be paying up front, it was significantly faster and I could not physically function like this. I didn't want to be waiting in the public system. When I had those results, they said I had mild carpal tunnel in my left wrist only, and the neurologist recommended surgery if I was having symptoms. But this didn't make sense to me because I was having symptoms on both sides, from fingertips all the way up to shoulders, and I didn't understand how one little ligament here could cause symptoms on the opposite shoulder. And the prospect of surgery, which would have put one or both hands into casts for 6 weeks, with my home situation and a baby, was terrifying. So I didn't do that. Instead, I consulted with an osteopath to see if I could get any sort of relief. And she figured out that working on my neck altered the sensation in my fingertips. So it was probably a neck problem and not a wrist problem, and she recommended a CT scan. So I went back to the doctor for a referral, and he upgraded that to a MRI, and that found the first lesion in my neck. And the first MRI, out of pocket, privately, cost me about $1,000. And I was very distressed at this point because I read that report and I understood what a demyelinating lesion would mean. And I was actively stressed as well, between potentially losing my ability to work, managing a baby that still needed a lot of carrying, and the expense of rapid diagnostics. On top of that, my ex was actively making my life harder at home. As I was getting too sick to do housework, he would insist that he was sicker and that in fact I should be doing more to support him, and that he couldn't do housework and was at home purchasing food via menu log up to twice a day, which was rapidly burning through the limited funds I had after finishing maternity leave. He was not working at that time. I was literally doing all of the work, all of the housework, and all of the childcare, but he would insist that it wasn't enough. I was not doing enough, while he also spent increasing amounts of the money I did earn on things we didn't need, while I'm trying to pay for multiple MRIs for myself. And by things we didn't mean, I mean things like paintball vouchers, really elective purchases, while I'm desperately trying to pay for the MRIs. After the second MRI with contrast, the private neurologist referred me back to the public system, which in Australia is basically universal healthcare, socialised medicine, whatever you want to call it. After struggling for months in the private system and spending multiple thousands of dollars, the switch to the public system was something of a relief. The public system in Australia is basically free. It costs me nothing to do anything in hospital but parking. So it's cost me nothing to see the neurologist or get an MRI at the hospital, because I did need a third one. However, the appointments are allocated. There's very little flexibility on when I can get my appointments. They're just offered, and then I need to work around that, which means sometimes my routine MRIs have ended up being at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. But if it saves me $1,000 each time, I will put up with the inconvenience. The public system also allows different specialists to liaise with one another at multidisciplinary meetings. So my case got discussed all together between the neurologists and radiology and hematology. This meant I did a bunch more blood tests before they settled on my diagnosis, at no additional costs to me. But I'm really glad I did it, because you want them to be thorough with a life-changing diagnosis. And then I started Kesimpta. The cost of Kesimpta, which is a monthly injection, that I was paying out of pocket was about $60 a month. And that's because Australia runs a pharmaceutical benefit scheme. And without it, the Kesimpta would cost closer to $2,000 a month. But I was paying just $60 delivered to my home. As of now, I'm on Ocrevus, which is a infusion intravenously that I get in the hospital every 6 months. I had the option of doing that back through the private system or sticking with the public one. And because I have private health insurance, if I went privately, that would cost me $500 a dose, which is not as bad as in the US, but it was more than I was comfortable paying. So instead, I went back through the public system, which means that for my Ocrevus infusion, I pay absolutely $0. The only catch is that I can only get it done on a Thursday, and my appointments are allocated. I can't really choose the date or the time. But considering how much money that saves me, I'm not complaining. See, socialised medicine and universal healthcare is good, actually. But I do really have to learn not to push myself, which is incredibly frustrating, because I have the type of psychology where I only feel worthy of existence if I'm making something or doing things for other people. And I know, logically, that's not the case. But feelings aren't logic. And I feel what I feel. So I keep pushing myself to do the things I want to do, and that results in falling into a very unwell heap when I do too many. Because the trick with managing multiple sclerosis isn't to push it, it's not to fight it. The trick is to just toe the line, work on the defensive so that you maintain function rather than desperately trying to claw it back, because that's how you retain the most energy in the disease that saps your energy. But teaching myself not to fight, that's a hard lesson to learn. It's a constantly, incredibly frustrating lesson. But at least being Australian, my multiple sclerosis won't bankrupt me as well. Every day I'm glad I'm in Australia and not some other larger English-speaking country. So hopefully I get back into the saddle soon and mix up the videos a bit. If there's any questions you have or topics you'd like to discuss, feel free to leave a comment down below. But until then, I'll try and rest, and I'll see you next time. Bye.